The first thing I remember is the sound of someone breathing in my ear. Even though I was completely alone. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just slow, uneven breathing like someone trying very hard not to be noticed. I froze, phone still glowing in my hand, thumb hovering over the screen as if I could pause reality the same way I paused a video. I told myself it was nothing, that it had to be nothing. But deep down, a cold thought slid into my mind and refused to leave. If I could hear it, that meant it was close. And that's when I realized something had already gone terribly wrong. You see, every story you're about to hear tonight has one thing in common. None of us were looking for trouble. None of us were chasing fear. We were just living normal American lives. Driving home from work, staying the night at a friend's house, answering a late call, moving into a new place, taking a shortcut we'd taken 100 times before. Ordinary moments. Safe moments. At least that's what we thought. Because real horror doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with warning music or flashing signs. It slips in quietly, wearing the mask of normal life, waiting for the exact second you let your guard down. And when you finally realize what's happening, it's already too late to undo it. There's a reason some stories never make the news. A reason police reports stay vague. A reason certain 911 calls end abruptly and are never explained. It's not always because there's no evidence. Sometimes it's because the truth doesn't fit into words that make sense. Sometimes the truth sounds insane. Tonight, you're going to hear 10 stories that Americans still argue about. Stories that split families, ruin sleep, and turn quiet memories into lifelong nightmares. Stories people regret sharing but regret even more experiencing. Every one of these stories starts the same way. Calm, familiar, safe. And every one of them ends with a question no one can answer. What makes them worse, what makes them stick, is that they didn't happen in abandoned asylums or deep in the wilderness. They happen in places you recognize. Suburbs, highways, apartments, backyards. Places where people lock their doors at night and believe that's enough. It wasn't. One of these stories begins with a man who just wanted to finish his night shift and go home. Another starts with a family celebrating what should have been the happiest week of their lives. One involves a sound that only happened at exactly 3:17 a.m. and stopped the moment someone noticed it. Another ends with a discovery so disturbing that the people involved still refused to say what they saw, only what they felt. And that feeling, that sudden crushing realization that you are no longer in control, is something none of us ever forget. I want you to understand something before we continue. These are not campfire stories. They aren't urban legends passed around for fun. They are moments pulled from real lives, told by people who still check behind doors, still hesitate before answering knocks, still replay one specific second over and over in their minds, wondering what would have happened if they'd reacted just a little faster. Or not at all. As you listen, you might feel the urge to dismiss what you're hearing. To tell yourself there must be a logical explanation. That fear exaggerates memory. That people misunderstand what they see in the dark. That's normal. That's exactly what every person in these stories thought too. Until the night they heard something they weren't meant to hear. Until they saw something that wasn't supposed to exist. Until they realized the scariest part wasn't what happened. It was what never got explained. So before we go any further, ask yourself one thing. If something went wrong tonight right where you are, would anyone believe you? Because after this, you may wish you'd never listened. Before any of this happened, my life was painfully ordinary. And that's what made it feel safe. My name doesn't matter much, but for context, I was in my early 30s. Living in a quiet mid-sized American town where nothing ever made the news unless someone's dog went missing or a high school team won a championship. I worked a regular office job, paid my bills on time, and went to bed most nights thinking about things that felt small and manageable. Deadlines, groceries, whether I'd remember to lock the car. On the night this story begins, it was just after 10 p.m. I was home alone in my apartment, the kind of place that looks identical to every other unit on the block. Beige walls. Neutral carpet. A couch that came with the place because the landlord didn't want to move it. Outside, the streetlights cast soft yellow pools across the parking lot, and the steady hum of distant traffic blended with the low buzz of the refrigerator. It was the kind of soundscape you stop noticing because it's always there. I wasn't doing anything unusual. No parties. No drinking. No late-night experiments or risky decisions. I had just finished dinner and was stretched out on the couch, scrolling through my phone, half watching a rerun on TV. The windows were closed, the doors were locked, and for the first time all day my mind felt quiet. I remember feeling relieved. The day had been long but uneventful. Work had dragged. Emails had piled up. But now there was nowhere I needed to be and nothing I needed to fix. The apartment felt like a bubble, separate from the rest of the world. Safe. Predictable. Mine. I'd lived there for almost 2 years and had never had a single problem. No strange neighbors. No break-ins. No weird noises beyond the occasional footsteps in the hallway or someone's TV playing too loud through the wall. The building was old, sure, but familiar. Comforting, even. That night, I was thinking about the weekend ahead. I had plans to meet a friend for coffee, maybe catch a movie, maybe do nothing at all. Normal plans. The kind of plans you make when you assume the future is stable and unthreatening. At around 10:30, I muted the TV and stood up to wash the dishes. The kitchen light flicked on instantly, filling the small space with warm brightness. I remember noticing how calm everything felt, how the air seemed still, how the world outside had settled into that late-night quiet that only comes once most people are asleep. I washed my plate, dried it, set it in the cabinet. Routine. Reassuring. Boring. When I finished, I checked the locks out of habit. Front door locked. Deadbolt secure. Window latches closed. Everything exactly as it should be. I even remember smiling to myself, feeling slightly ridiculous for checking so carefully when nothing had ever happened before. I went back to the living room, turned the volume on the TV back up just enough to hear it, and sat down again. My phone buzzed once with a notification I barely glanced at. Whatever it was, it didn't feel important. Nothing did. That's the part people don't expect when they hear stories like this. There was no sense of dread. No bad feeling in my gut. No warning signs I ignored. Just a quiet night. A locked door. A familiar room. And the comforting belief that whatever happened next would be completely under my control. It started with something so small I almost missed it. A sound barely more than a shift in the air. First, I thought it came from the TV. One of those background noises shows used to fill silence. I glanced up, half expecting to see a character moving across the screen, but nothing matched what I'd heard. The scene was quiet. Too quiet. I muted the TV again. That's when I noticed the apartment felt different. Not dangerous. Not yet. Just off. The refrigerator hummed like always, but the sound felt louder somehow, more isolated. The ticking of the wall clock suddenly stood out, each second stretching a little longer than the last. I shifted on the couch, trying to get comfortable, but the cushions felt firmer than they had earlier, as if I was sitting more upright without meaning to. Then I heard it again. A soft sound from somewhere deeper in the apartment. Not a bang. Not a crash. Just a faint, dull noise like something brushing against fabric or plastic. I frowned and listened, holding my breath for a second. Silence followed. Long enough that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Almost. Probably the building, I muttered under my breath. Old apartments made noises. Pipes knocked. Walls creaked. Neighbors shifted in their sleep. I'd heard all of it before. This was nothing new. Still, I found myself standing up. I didn't feel scared, just alert, like when you think you hear your name called in a crowded room. I walked slowly toward the hallway, the carpet muffling my footsteps. The light above the stove cast a dim glow down the corridor, leaving the bedroom door and bathroom half-shadowed. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I stood there for a moment listening. The air felt cooler in the hallway than it had in the living room. Not cold. Just noticeably different, like stepping into a space that hadn't been disturbed in a while. I shook my head and turned back toward the couch. That's when I felt it. The sensation wasn't sharp or sudden. It crept in quietly, settling between my shoulders like a weight I couldn't see. The unmistakable feeling of being watched. I stopped walking. The apartment was empty. I knew that. I checked the locks myself. But the feeling didn't fade when I told myself that. If anything, it sharpened, my awareness narrowing, my breathing slowing as my body paid attention to something my mind couldn't explain. I glanced toward the front door. Still locked. Still solid. Still exactly where it had always been. Behind me something clicked. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just a soft plastic sound like a switch being touched or a button being pressed halfway down. My heart skipped. A small stutter that I felt more than heard. I turned slowly. Nothing had changed. The hallway looked the same. Shadows rested in the same places. Doors closed. Lights steady. No movement. No figures. No reason for my pulse to be climbing the way it was. I laughed under my breath, a short, nervous sound. "Get it together," I whispered. I went back to the couch but didn't sit down right away. Instead, I stood there listening harder than before. The silence felt thicker now, as if the apartment was absorbing sound instead of reflecting it. Even the refrigerator seemed quieter. Then came the smell. Faint. Unfamiliar. Not smoke. Not gas. Just something stale, like cold air that had been trapped too long in a place no one used. It drifted through the room slowly, subtle enough that I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I checked the windows again. Still closed. My phone buzzed in my hand and I nearly dropped it. The screen lit up, flooding my face with sudden light. A text from a friend, something mundane, a joke I would have laughed at any other night. But as the glow faded, I noticed something else. My reflection in the dark TV screen. For a split second, it looked like my eyes weren't focused on me, like they were fixed on something just over my shoulder. I spun around, heart pounding now, breath tight in my chest. Nothing. Still nothing. But the feeling didn't go away. It settled in, deeper, quieter, more patient. Whatever it wasn't rushing. And somehow that was the part that scared me most. The hallway light flickered. Just once. A sharp blink, on, off, on again. My stomach dropped. Lights didn't flicker in this apartment. Not once since I moved in. I stood frozen, staring down the narrow hallway as if I could will it to explain itself. The air felt heavier now, pressing down on my chest, making each breath take more effort than the last. Then the bedroom door creaked. Slowly. I hadn't touched it. I watched as the door moved inward an inch. Then two. The hinges groaning softly like they were being forced to remember how to move after years of disuse. A thin slice of darkness opened between the door and the frame. And from inside the bedroom a sound. Breathing. Not mine. It was slow and uneven, with a faint wetness to it, like air dragging through something that wasn't meant to breathe anymore. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out every other thought. This wasn't the building. This wasn't my imagination. Something was in my apartment. I took a step back, my heel bumping into the coffee table. The small impact echoed too loudly in the sudden stillness. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It felt deliberate, like whatever was in the bedroom had noticed me. Like it was listening now. "Hello." My voice came out thin, trembling, barely louder than a whisper. I didn't know why I said it. Habit, maybe. Or denial refusing to die quietly. The answer came in the form of movement. A shape shifted in the darkness beyond the bedroom door. First, I couldn't make sense of it. The outline was wrong, too tall for the doorway, too narrow through the shoulders. It leaned forward, and I realized the darkness wasn't hiding it. It was the darkness. The hallway light dimmed, not flickering this time, just fading, as if the bulb itself was afraid to stay bright. Shadows stretched along the walls, crawling toward me. And then the thing stepped forward. One foot emerged into the light. If you could call it a foot. It bent strangely, joints angled in a way that made my skin crawl. Toes too long, pressing flat against the carpet like it was testing the ground before committing its weight. The air grew colder instantly, sharp enough to sting my lungs. I couldn't move. My brain screamed at my body, but fear had locked every muscle in place. The rest of it followed slowly, unfolding into the hallway with unnatural care. Its head brushed the top of the doorframe, but instead of ducking, its neck bent sideways, bones shifting with a dry, cracking sound. I finally saw its face. Or what passed for one. The skin looked stretched and pale, pulled tight over angles that shouldn't exist. No expression. No emotion. Just deep, shadowed hollows where eyes should have been. Except they weren't empty. Something inside them reflected the light. Not a glow. A recognition. It knew I was there. And worse, it knew I was afraid. The pressure in the room intensified, like the apartment itself was collapsing inward. My ears popped. My head throbbed. Every instinct I had screamed that the space between me and that thing was shrinking. Even though it hadn't taken another step. Didn't need to. "You shouldn't be here," it said. The voice didn't come from its mouth. Came from everywhere. Inside the walls. Inside my head. Inside my chest. I staggered back, finally breaking free of the paralysis. My heart slammed so hard it felt like it might tear its way out. This wasn't a break-in. This wasn't a nightmare. This was something that belonged here. And I didn't. The thing tilted its head, mirroring the movement I'd made earlier without realizing it. Its mouth opened wider than any human should. And the smell hit me again, stronger now. Old air. Rot. Dust from places no one should ever open. That was the moment understanding slammed into me with terrifying clarity. This wasn't watching me. It wasn't curious. It was waiting. Waiting for me to realize the truth. I turned to run. And behind me, the apartment door slammed shut on its own, locking with a sharp final click. Whatever had come out of that bedroom wasn't just in my home anymore. It had closed the exit. And I knew, absolutely undeniably, that if I didn't escape right now, this place would be the last thing I ever remembered as home. I ran. Not thinking. Not planning. Just pure animal movement. My bare feet slammed against the floor as I sprinted down the hallway, heart detonating in my chest. Behind me the air shifted, not footsteps, not running, something worse. Like pressure rolling forward. Like the space itself was being dragged after me. I threw myself into the bathroom and slammed the door shut. The lock clicked. For half a second, relief hit me so hard my knees nearly buckled. Then the door bowed inward. Not violently. Not like a kick. Like something leaning its weight against it, testing it. I stumbled backward, slipping on the tile, hands scrabbling for balance. The light above flickered wildly, buzzing like an insect trapped in glass. The mirror over the sink shook, rattling against the wall. "Please?" I gasped out loud without meaning to. The pressure increased. The door creaked, wood fibers groaning in protest. The handle twisted slowly on its own, metal squealing as if being turned by hands that didn't understand how human joints worked. My vision tunneled. Think. The window. The tiny frosted window above the tub. I lunged for it, fingers shaking so badly I could barely grip the latch. The handle wouldn't budge. I yanked again, harder. Behind me a crack. The bathroom door split down the center. A long fracture racing from top to bottom like a lightning bolt through wood. Cold air rushed in, carrying that same rotten ancient smell. I slammed my shoulder into the window. Once. Twice. Glass exploded outward on the third hit, shards raining down into the darkness below. Night air flooded in, sharp and freezing, shocking my lungs. The sound behind me changed. No longer patient. No longer calm. The pressure surged. I didn't look back. I climbed. Glass tore into my palms. Pain flared, hot and bright, but adrenaline swallowed it whole. I hauled myself through the narrow opening, ribs scraping the frame, skin tearing as I fell outward and dropped. I hit the fire escape hard, the metal rattling beneath me. Pain shot up my leg, white hot, but I screamed and rolled, scrambling away from the window just as something hit the frame behind me. The metal shrieked. The fire escape shuddered violently, bolts screaming as if they were about to tear free from the wall. I crawled, then staggered to my feet, half limping, half running down the narrow stairs. Above me, movement. Not climbing. Not chasing. Pouring. Like darkness spilling through the broken window, stretching, thinning, reaching. I slipped, nearly falling through the gaps in the stairs, catching myself at the last second. My fingers screamed in protest, slick with blood and sweat. The thing shifted again, closer now, the metal around me frosting over, crackling faintly. I jumped the last few steps. Hit the alley hard. Didn't stop. Didn't slow. I ran until my lungs felt like they were shredding. Until my legs buckled and I slammed into a chain-link fence at the end of the block. I collapsed there, gasping, sobbing, staring back toward the building. Nothing followed me out. No footsteps. No sound. Just silence. Too clean. Too sudden. People came eventually. Neighbors, police, flashing lights washing the alley in red and blue. Someone asked me questions. Someone wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. But all I could do was stare at the third-floor window. The bathroom window. It was dark. Unbroken. Perfectly intact. No shattered glass. No bent frame. No sign anyone had ever escaped through it. And that was when the realization hit me, slow, sickening, undeniable. I hadn't escaped. I had been let go. And whatever lived in that apartment hadn't failed to catch me. It had simply decided I was worth chasing again later. They told me I was safe. That word safe was repeated so many times it started to sound hollow, like something people say when they don't actually know what else to offer. I spent the rest of that night in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and warm plastic. My hands were wrapped in gauze, my ribs bruised, my ankle badly sprained from the fall. A doctor asked me how I got hurt. A police officer asked me what happened in the apartment. I told them everything. Not the supernatural parts, not at first. I started small. Sounds. Pressure. The door. The escape. They exchanged looks. Then I told them about the presence. The way the air moved. The way the space felt crowded even when nothing was there. That's when the officer gently closed his notebook. Probably a panic episode, he said kindly. Stress can do strange things. They went back to the apartment the next morning. 2 officers. A building supervisor. Later a fire marshal. They found nothing. No damage to the bathroom door. No cracks. No bent hinges. No broken glass. The window was intact, sealed, dusty, as if it hadn't been opened in years. They checked the fire escape. No disturbed bolts. No loose panels. No signs anyone had climbed or jumped. One officer suggested maybe I dreamed it. Another suggested I'd broken into the alley from the stairwell and panicked. But there was one thing they couldn't explain. The security footage. The building had cameras in the hallway and stairwell. They pulled the recordings from that night. At 2:14 a.m., I exited my apartment. Calmly. No running. No panic. I stepped into the hallway, stood still for exactly 12 seconds, then turned and looked back into my apartment. The door was open behind me. I stood there unmoving. Then slowly I stepped backward. Back into the apartment. The door closed. The footage jumped ahead. At 2:29 a.m., 15 minutes later, I appeared again. This time sprinting. This time screaming. This time bleeding. I burst into the stairwell like something was right behind me. But the hallway camera never showed anything else leaving the apartment. No shadow. No movement. Nothing. They asked me what happened during those 15 minutes. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. I moved out 2 days later. Didn't pack. Didn't go back. Just grabbed what I had at the hospital and left the city entirely. I've been staying with a friend since, sleeping on a couch that creaks every time I breathe too deeply. Some nights I almost convince myself it's over. That it was stress. Fear. A break. But then small things happen. My phone dies at exactly 2:14 a.m. Every night. No matter how charged it is. Sometimes when I'm half asleep I feel that same pressure in the room, as if the air is leaning closer. Waiting. Once I woke up to find dirt under my fingernails. Another time my bathroom mirror was fogged over, except for a single clear handprint pressed against the glass from the inside. I don't go into dark rooms anymore. I don't close doors fully. And I never sleep facing the wall. Because occasionally, just occasionally, I hear it. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Just that slow, familiar shift in the air. Like something adjusting its position. Getting comfortable. As if it followed me out of that apartment. And is patiently waiting for the moment I forget it's still here.